This episode of Dungeon Crawlers Radio is brought to you by Geek Girl Realty. Are you looking for that fortress of solitude or a cottage in the woods? Geek Girl Realty can help you out. Check them out at www.geekgirlrealty.com.
Dungeon Crawlers.
Alright everyone, welcome to another episode of Dungeon Crawlers, where we're going to blow your mind. Well, maybe not. We're just going to be talking about time travel, the theory behind it. Well, and this is mainly because of all the events that happened in Avengers Endgame. If you haven't seen the movie, maybe you shouldn't listen to the rest of this show.
Or,
go watch
according
it,
to
then
the
come back.
director, we have hit the spoiler moratorium.
Okay, well,
If
if that's the
give it
case,
2
folks,
weeks.
you're on your own. So, yes.
Nice.
Time travel. It makes things very complex and difficult. And many of us just go, what? Yeah. So, just to give
there's
some...
so many different philosophies out there, right? I mean,
They are.
time travel in general is difficult to comprehend, but all of a sudden you add in all these philosophies, and things just get complicated.
Yeah. I'm going to throw out some shows or movies and stuff like that that have dealt with time travel. We have Predestination, About Time, X-Men Days of Future Past, Looper, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban.
Oh, yeah.
The new Star Trek with Chris Pine in them, Interstellar, Source Code, Donnie Darko, Midnight in Paris, Primer, Idiocracy, Hot Tub Time Machine, The Butterfly Effect, Men in Black 3, The Lake House, Back to the Future, The Time Traveler's Wife, The Time Machine, Meet the Robinsons, Groundhog Day, 13 Going on 30, Project Almanac, The Terminator. I mean, the list continues to go on.
I have a question, though. Aren't some of those considered alternate realities? Like, what's the difference between time travel and alternate reality?
That's the really good question.
I'm sorry. Keep in mind, I'm the dumb one in this group.
No, it's fine. That is a really good question because, with Avengers Endgame, that's kind of how they're presenting the after effects and the aftermath of their time travel. That it has created an alternate reality.
Because that's how they explain Star Trek, too, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's how they've explained Star Trek as well. So,
hold on, before we go on to that, are we talking about this right now? Is that? Or are we going to go into their different time travels as we go through the show?
I mean, we can do all that. There is the basic time travel, like we see in Doctor Who, where they jump in a machine, they go to some point in time, future, past, and so forth, and they do their thing. I feel like Back to the Future is a little bit like that as well. Anything that they alter or change kind of changes and manipulates things in small ways.
Well, at the same time, Doctor Who, though, he has certain set points in history that he cannot
be changed. Correct.
Yeah.
That reminds me of the Superman meme. Or is it Batman?
It's just one of those. I don't know. I can't. Oh yeah. The where.
Where he talks about why he can't save Batman's family.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's set points in history that he cannot change, and I don't know if it's that he cannot because it'll alter the timeline.
In Doctor Who it's called a fixed point in time, and it cannot be altered or changed. No matter how hard you try or attempt to fix it, it cannot be changed. Like one of those fixed point in time is when we lose Amy and Rory. That's just a point in time that can never be changed. No matter how hard they try or what they do, it can never be altered. That's why, and they kind of explain that, and that's why Amy and Rory can't come back. There's also other points in time that cannot be altered or changed.
Also in the Angels episode, they go into that really well, that, even though everything is set, though, like everything that happens to her, then she has to get the message to the Doctor in the future, which is really the Doctor in the past. Like, everything is set up so perfectly. It's basically, no, time is running. We are in this river, and we can't change it.
Yes. So there is that theory. So, time is like a river. It flows in one direction. Yes, we can jump in, but ultimately we cannot change it, no matter how hard we try. There are other versions of time travel out there that we can, and we see that in the Time Machine, the movie and the book, The Time Machine. He tries to go and he tries to go back in time to save his fiance, and no matter how hard he tries, she still ends up dying. Yes, he saves her at that one point, but time still catches up in some fashion that she dies. So, is time travel that way? We've seen in other movies where it can be altered and messed with, and Army of Darkness is one of those where Ash goes back in time, he makes a mess of things, and we see what happens of that. Now, because of movies like Endgame and other movies out there, it is stated that it's in the past, it's already happened. So, is the person going back into the past really altering time, or is that how time really happened, and we're just now catching up to the point in the future of going back in time, much like Fry and becoming his own grandfather in Futurama?
And we see stuff like that in Harry Potter. It is it's going back in time, and not necessarily changing because you had already changed the past, but they'd seen that, and everything that you've already seen in the past catches back up with you in the future, even if you are actually physically going back and causing those incidences.
Yeah,
still happening. It's still the same kind of theory, right?
Well, and isn't there like a time so I remember this movie with Jake Gyllenhaal that wasn't time, but it was about alternate realities, and I'm gonna have to look it up. But it was where he no, it's another one. I'm gonna have to look it up. It was more science fiction, but basically he had to go in certain points he was in the future, and in some certain points he was in the past, so they were trying to fix okay, hang on. I'm going to have to look this up because we got in a conversation about it, but I think that was more about alternate realities than the future, but they were messing with time as well. So
yeah. Well, I mean, if you look at A Sound of Thunder, one of my favorite Ray Bradbury stories, if you all...
By the way, it's source code.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's where the butterfly effect theory comes from, is if you change... Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you make any alterations in the past, it creates a complete and new future. That's where they go back in time, the guy steps on the butterfly and blah, 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 and then they keep trying to correct things and making it worse. But, that makes more sense to me at how time travel should happen. If you make any change, it drastically changes the future timeline. It's not going to be, it's not going to be like we've seen in a lot of science fiction where it's a river and no matter what changes we make, it can't ultimately change it. Yeah, and I've always really enjoyed that book and that film, but at the same time, it ultimately is terrifying to think that such a small, minute change, such as stepping on one butterfly, makes it so. I mean, ultimately, humanity doesn't exist, and we now have this breed of superior monkeys that are now alive and rampant,
or was Planet of the Apes not time travel?
Well, but then even then,
no, Planet of the Apes was different.
Yeah,
I mean, there was time travel involved, but it wasn't. There were some astronauts that went through a wormhole and got shot into the future.
Yeah, but even in the example you're talking about, Daniel, with the butterfly effect, you have like a time bubble that forms around you. So it's similar to what Back to the Future is worried about, except for Back to the Future, that time bubble takes a little while to catch up and to solidify. Right?
Yes, yeah.
Because, I mean, Marty, he makes changes to the past, but they're not instantaneously, it doesn't instantaneously wipe him out, because he still has chances to be able to correct it. But we do see in the end of the movie that he starts to disappear.
Yeah. Yeah, there is that time period. He's being erased from existence, and it goes through his. Honestly, it's kind of confusing. That one, even that is confusing because he's the youngest child. You'd think he'd be the one to go first, but whatever. It doesn't make. Yeah, it doesn't make for a good movie. Still a great movie. I enjoyed it. Even then, we see where Biff goes back in time and really alters his future, and we see an alternate timeline. I like their explanation of that, where it's like, okay, there was some event that happened in the past that skewed things to the point where now in this new timeline, that no matter how many times we go back and go forth, this is the new timeline. Because
that is our timeline, though. That is the timeline. It wasn't an alternate reality.
Correct.
It was the reality. It changed their reality.
Yeah, it completely changed the reality. And the only reason that they know is because they've just freshly come in here. Eventually, their own memories would change to adjust to that reality. So we jump to Endgame, which is so confusing because they're like, nope, completely different. This created a new alternate reality, which is kind of along the lines of what we got with Back to the Future. But you guys still your timeline hasn't changed. When you yanked them out, it created a new timeline there. You guys are still continuous. That, to me, completely just doesn't make sense. Yeah.
So here's another question for you then, because the whole idea that I was saying that made sense to me was reaching back to the Abrams 2009 Star Trek reboot.
Yeah.
Where they literally, Spock went back in time. The giant drilling spaceship, the Romulan spaceship, went back in time and completely decimated both the Klingon and Starfleet's fleet.
Yes.
Destroyed so many ships, changed so much. Now, I was under the impression that created the Kelvin timeline. Literally, it created an alternate reality timeline at that point. But from what I did a little reading online, and a lot of people are saying that they believe that Spock and that the spaceship didn't travel back into the prime timeline. They traveled to an alternate reality that was similar.
Let's go back to my question about what's the difference.
That reality's timeline. Have you heard anything critical?
Okay, well, I mean, so let's go on that. That makes sense if they would have said, I traveled to an alternate reality, instead of saying, I traveled back in time. That's kind of the problem that I'm seeing, especially with Star Trek. It's like, okay, you didn't go back in time. You went to an alternate universe, entered into that universe, and altered how things transpired in that universe. If that is the case, okay, that makes more sense than calling it time travel. Yes, he kind of went back in time, but he went to another universe which dramatically altered things. That would explain why our characters look differently and things happen differently. I can get behind.
Exactly, and you'd have to do it that way because also Star Trek, in so many different versions, so many of the TV shows, explore the possibility of time travel. When they go back in time for the Trouble with Tribbles, when they go back in time in the original series, Voyager, every single iteration deals with time travel, and every iteration says we can change the future. But in the Kelvin timeline, not only do they change
this is making my brain melt.
The outcome was supposed to be, they change it dramatically.
Yeah. No, and it's okay. And in Star Trek, we even saw that they do have alternate dimensions, alternate realities. When we saw the mirror universes, we saw that in the original Star Trek series. We saw that in Deep Space Nine, and that's fine. I would much rather be behind the alternate universe or the alternate dimension theory than this calling it time travel. Because, I mean, that's what they're saying is, oh, he went back in time into an alternate reality because they don't want to mess with what has already been set up. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. That works so that they can keep their canon that they had before. I mean, even Star Wars has done time travel at this point now. That was introduced with Star Wars Rebels.
With
I don't
know about that yet.
Right.
Season 4. You'll have to watch it. Yeah, I won't say anything more on that, but it was brief. It was a little bit. They got rid of it. Because when you open up time travel, it creates too many paradoxes, too many possibilities and openings to rewrite things. And I appreciate the fact that Disney did acquire this giant sandbox that is Star Wars, and they just said, we're throwing all this out. These are just legends. Instead of doing some time travel event where it wipes everything out and recategorizes it. It is frustrating they're throwing all that out. But at the same time, we don't know. But it complicates things. I guess that's the best way to do it. To say it. Yeah. With Endgame and the time travel that was thrown in there, yes, they had to do it, but at the same time, I'm extremely confused with how they did it. They're like, if you go to a certain point in time, I think Scott even pointed this out when we were on the last show reviewing it, there's a certain point in time, there's 3 Infinity Stones on Earth. Well, to be truthful, there's a certain point in time when all 6 Infinity Stones are on Earth. Why not go then? Why not zap just before he takes the stone from Vision, keeping Vision alive, getting that, and then taking the other 5 stones. Ta-da, you win. No, we have to make the most overcomplicated process where they screw everything up, and they create this alternate reality schism. And if they would have made it so that the things that they did created an alternate reality, I'm okay. But if that would have been permanent all the way along, instead of saying, well, no, they're here, all the events in their past has still happened, but this other realm where Thanos and Nebula came from, that's now a whole completely new universe with a new timeline, and they'll never experience the Infinity Saga from that point on. And it's just like, what the crap? This is because her timeline is still intact. By killing her past self, that ruined her.
So what they're explaining, Mackenzie, is when Thanos came through the time portal, right? He came from the past to our present, or their present, right? As soon as he did that, he removed himself and his entire army from a timeline, and by doing so, he created a parallel reality.
Yes, and so the reality that we're in through the movies is still intact, which makes no sense to me.
But now there's a parallel reality running parallel to our own, where Thanos just disappeared, just completely vanished out of history. Nobody knows why.
So
nobody knows.
Wait, are we talking about the Gamora who's still alive, or are we talking about the one that he sacrificed for the Soul Stone?
They just disappeared.
Yes. So the Gamora that sacrificed is dead. She died.
To say Scarlett Johansson.
Black Widow. She's gone.
Loki. Yeah. Loki from our timeline, our original Loki.
Because by the way, I didn't realize this until today.
So here's another thing.
Thanos, he wasn't snapped. Thanos strangled him. Which I did not know, so I feel very stupid at the moment. But we will go there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was before the snap. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's okay. So here's another thing. In the movie, when we see
so
Loki
is that how
pick
he's
up the
going to get his
Tesseract
TV
and disappear,
show?
Another alternate timeline.
Yep.
Well, yeah, because it's going to be an alternate timeline. So this is the thing that just makes, at least with me, so frustrated with Endgame, is their explanation, their MacGuffin is, all these events that transpired just created alternate realities all over the place. So instead of having, this one solid timeline, you now have this new timeline with Loki. You have this new timeline where Thanos and his army disappeared, and they never experienced that end battle with him and the Infinity Stones. And Tony's probably living life the way he did, and Cap's doing the thing he did.
It bothered. Well, okay, so it bothered. Can I tell you why it bothers me?
Yes.
Because I have a very clear reason. Like with Back to the Future, any change that they made, there were consequences.
Yes.
There was weight. With
yeah,
this,
but how did you
all
know
they needed to do was go
the
back
pin
in time and get more
particles
pin
from the
particles. There's no
1970s would even
consequences.
work?
Yeah.
So?
They're pin particles. They haven't changed.
They haven't changed. Well, and here's the other thing that you don't really realize is Thanos, the reason he's able to bring the entire army to the future is because they're able to mass reproduce those pin particles. So all of them are able to come back, which, okay, great. They are technologically advanced. I can deal with that. But here's the biggest thing that boggles my mind and frustrates me, besides all these other points we've hit, is Captain America goes back in time. I mean, I'm happy he gets his happy ending. But when he went back in time and married Peggy, because she already had a different husband, that created another alternate reality, which he then lived through and then came back. That doesn't make sense at all, because how was he back to that original reality as an old man? Yeah. If he created an alternate
comic books
reality,
muck stuff up though.
So that's the. Well, I mean, this isn't even in the comic books. This is something they created, but that mucks up the entire theory. When we see Loki despair, he's not there anymore. He is gone from that timeline. In that point. So, I mean, this is where it just mucks everything up. Because, okay, if he disappeared,
Thor
so
saved Jane in the Dark World.
He never went back to Asgard, blah, blah, blah.
Could have destroyed reality in that world?
Exactly.
In that new timeline, correct.
We don't know. That's the thing. It could have gone any way because he wasn't in prison at that point. So as far as we know in that timeline, he went right back to Asgard and took over. As far as we know in that timeline, he took the Tesseract and went to 10 billion universes over and was never seen again. We have no idea what happened in that time.
Yeah.
It could be completely different.
Yeah, So again, all these questions, all these holes, and they're saying yes. When these events happened, it created a new alternate timeline. The one flaw to that is the fact that Captain America returns as an old man. How is that possible? If he went back in time, was with Peggy, that would have created a brand new alternate reality. How was he there at the end as an old man?
He should have. So this would have been so easy to fix too. All they would have needed to do
is he did, and he just didn't end up in the same spot.
He should have brought back the old man.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. This is the thing. These are the things that bug me so much about the way they did this. I get the reason why they had to do it. I get the reason they wanted to do it. It disappointed me that we didn't have an epic battle with the Thanos that we expected. They went through the process. The one that got the gemstones, the one that did the snap. I get that they've made it so that when you harness all that power, it damages you. They've come out and said that Hulk is permanently damaged from using that. He's never going to use that arm. That's why it's smaller and blackened. We've seen what happened with Tony. Again, I'm okay with those things. I really wish we would have had some battle with that Thanos instead of dispatching him so quickly and then what the heck just happened. Yeah, so did everyone else. That's another giant thorn in my side, but I'll leave that alone because it has nothing to do with time travel.
I was going to say, but going back to the time travel, the thing that bothered me is that they set up rules and then they change the rules based on the story.
Yeah.
Some of the most powerful stories are when you set up a rule and you still tell the story within those rules.
Well,
those mechanics.
And if you do break them, have a logical and solid reason why that can be broken. With Captain America showing back up at the end as an old man on that bench right after they tried to zap him back, that broke their own rules that they set and made everything previously just no, none of this makes sense. That's why I left the movie going, I'm not this is not the movie I was expecting. This is I'm really confused, and it doesn't make sense. Was it a good movie? Yes. Fundamentally, it has some holes.
But does it?
Some plot
now, here's the other question: does it make sense
at all?
Until, and bear with me while I'm trying to get these words out. Does it make less sense on an intellectual level, or on a geek level, or both? Because I feel like those two things don't always cross each other, or sometimes they even cancel each other out.
On a sci-fi, right? I think it's on a storyteller scale, because we don't know how time travel really works.
No.
There's a lot of theories, a lot of math, but I think on a storytelling level, the
Is
fact
it wrong?
that
I never want to find out
and then they kind of
if time travel works, because I don't want to find out.
It was a great emotional moment. No, do I?
I mean, I'll be honest. I don't think time travel is possible. It's not. I don't think it ever will be possible in any way, shape, or form.
Found a black
it's something
hole,
that we've used in movies, in books, and stuff like that.
We have now.
I mean, we found black holes. We've never gone through one. Correct. But the simple thing is, I mean, so far, almost everything we've seen, time travel creates a new timeline with those consequences, and that is how that timeline goes. You know, the ancient one kind of explained it that way. You take these out, you create this new timeline, and this is how it goes.
I thought that was a
this
kind of
is
fun
now the
moment
new
with
reality.
the ancient one, though. And
this reality doesn't exist.
Which is funny because that.
Yeah.
Which is funny to me because the ancient one's timeline, the ancient one that explained that, she's the one who they lost Loki in the Tesseract.
Oh, so she technically, be alive.
They did create an alternate timeline from her world.
Yeah, and
like she is in that alternate timeline.
Well, I mean, they were creating alternate realities all over the place. Thor took Mjolnir. Well, now that until it's returned, it doesn't exist in that time. Granted, we know Cap takes it back to replace it, but still, there's all these questions. What was the point of returning everything if it created all these alternate realities? Other than, okay, we're going to give that reality back their weapons that they'll maybe need in the future. And then again, if that is the case, then Cap went to another alternate reality, stayed with Peggy, which is not, again, on that same reality timeline. There's no way he should be there as an old man. He should have just disappeared from that timeline from that point forward, just like Thanos and Nebula and the rest of his army, to never exist again. So, it's just the time travel theory or rules or whatever that they have introduced into this series is just mind-boggling messed up. At least
it changed.
Yeah, I mean, at least in my opinion, as a writer, as a movie lover, book lover, whatever, it just doesn't fit because they set finite rules. This is how it's going to be, and then they break them with no explanation or reason. It's just like, yeah, it's cool to see Cap show up at the end as an old man. Well, that contradicts everything you've already set up. That contradicts, the fact that Nebula is still alive after she killed her past self doesn't make sense. Oh, they jumped from an alternate reality, so their time.
I just died of laughter because the only thing that really bugged me about the movie was Nebula still being alive.
Well, and see, that's the thing. It makes sense from a parallel reality standpoint.
Why would they share?
Because that's not the original
there's another
Nebula.
thing about that. Why would they share the same neural whatever?
They shouldn't be on the same.
And I'm not seeing the cloud again.
Well, that's
exactly.
That is.
It's another MacGuffin.
That's another MacGuffin, and that's another thing that bugs me is, okay, if this is true, we've gone back in the past. Now that they've gone back in the past, they've created an alternate reality because they got the stone, and he left. So the second he left, that created an alternate reality. That Nebula is no longer the same Nebula. If you see, let's take DC's Crisis on Infinite Earths, and when Superman is talking to Lex Luthor, and he's like, you need to believe
remember
me. He's
that
like, I do.
story.
Well, how do you? Well, your heart's on the wrong side. People from different realities are completely different. Their thought processes are different. Their body is different. So we look at Marvel and it's not that way. It makes no sense. Because they're saying, yep, that's a completely different nebula. If that's the case, then there's no possible way they could be on the same neural network. They are completely different people. Their neural pathways would be completely different, in my opinion. It's just not possible.
Right.
I
just had another thought, kind of a time tangent, but so the Ancient One and Doctor Strange's Time Stone,
yes,
can also change time. It can jump back in time. It can jump forward in time, to the point where they can jump back in time, change reality, and then move forward along that new reality. And we see that both established in the first Infinity War and Doctor Strange. So are they saying also at that point, each time they did that, they created an alternate reality?
That's a good question. So every time...
Or are we going back to the single timeline? Oh, we just adjusted it like Back to the Future, and now we're moving forward on the right.
Well, that brings up a really good question. Most of the stuff that Doctor Strange did after he got the stone, is that creating a billion different alternate realities every time? He ate the apple and then brought it back to being a full apple.
What about the
Did that create an alternate reality? And then when he
to...
took it back, is that another alternate reality? The infinite time loop, was that constantly creating new alternate realities? By doing this, it completely breaks everything with Doctor Strange, in my opinion, because it's like, okay, if you're changing even a minute thing, is that not creating a new
Doctor
alternate
Strange
reality?
Kind of set up a lot of the time travel, but do you think they specifically made his story do that for that reason? So it was feasible and understandable to people?
Well, because if in that movie, if you watch it, time flows like a river. You can go back, you can go forward. But
it's a single timeline.
So my question is, when Doctor Strange sees all these different possibilities, then he's not really looking at time. He's just looking at different dimensions. He's looking at all the different alternate realities. He's not really looking in time based on the explanation they gave us in Endgame, which makes, again, no sense.
Right. But again, everything... If they could have had a moment, and I understand that they wanted to go back in time for fan service, 1, and for 2, they wanted to bring the army through, and for 3, they wanted to save Loki. Those are their 3 goals, right? Those are the 3 goals why they set up time travel in the method that they have. And I can understand that from a storytelling point of view. And honestly, I'm kind of okay with it, just because we get Loki back, really. But it would have been so much more powerful if they would have done something to change back to the timeline. It bothered me. They should have rewritten it. It really does.
I'm okay if it would have been rewritten. This is our new timeline. This is now how things are. And I get if they would have done that, we wouldn't have had. Yeah, if they would have done that, we wouldn't have had that ultimate sacrifice at the end that we saw, because we wouldn't have needed to. But that, in my opinion, is the best way that would have gone. Tony snapping his fingers, rewriting history, and seeing the Avengers completely different, because the events never happened. People didn't turn to dust and disappear. Those 5 years, they would have appeared 5 years later in a timeline that never suffered the events of Thanos and his army. I think that would have been a much cleaner, better ending, but yeah, we wouldn't have been able to have the sacrifice and then Cap getting his happy ending.
Can we argue that some of the stuff they did in Endgame was to make fans happy?
It makes things difficult.
Or was it purely story that ended up making the fans happy?
I think everything won.
I think it was story and to make fans happy. honestly. And they were wrapping up some characters for some actors that really were done. I mean, they've been playing these characters for over a decade. I get it. They wanted to have a clean farewell for them. I get that. I'm happy for them for that. But at the same time, by trying to accomplish those things, they have created a story that has massive holes in it that contradict their own laws. And the
thing is, I don't think it's necessarily to the film's detriment, but that's just me. I don't really watch movies to dissect them. I just watch them to experience them, which I think is where a lot of people are getting kind of what we were talking about with fandoms. I think people are focusing too much on certain things instead of just enjoying the experience. And I feel like that's a lot of it lost.
He's talking about you, Daniel.
No. So this is the thing. If that was the case...
I agree with you, Mackenzie. I agree.
If that was the case, then why are the Russo brothers spending so much time trying to explain how their time travel works and why things were able to work the way they were? I think a lot of people are confused because basically this pulls people out of the story. When you go to a movie, you go to enjoy it, and most often, even if it is crazy and insane, as long as that component remains the same throughout the movie, we can suspend our disbelief and enjoy it. But when something like this is so contradictory, our brain goes, wait a minute, that can't work. And it pulls us out of the story. And I've noticed over the last week and a half, maybe almost 2 weeks, there have been posts and there have been articles and interviews where they're explaining this. Obviously, this is affecting people where they're like, okay, wait a minute. It's pulling them out. It is so disjarring that it is causing
about it ending, though, and maybe they don't want it to end, and that's why they're picking it apart so much.
No, I again, this is just my opinion. I could be completely wrong. I just think that the human psyche, if anything does not make sense, they question. If something does not flow and feel right, they question. If it's something that is sustainable throughout the whole movie, I mean, let's face it, giant Jaegers fighting kaiju from Pacific Rim, that's never going to happen. But they explain it in a way with the drift and everything, we can believe that, and we sustain our that suspension of disbelief, and we're okay with that.
Right. It's just like, well, they've set up rules and they follow them. I'm going to go back to Ghostbusters. At the beginning of the movie, there's so much slow suspension of disbelief that eventually by the end of the movie, you go from college professors to a giant marshmallow man walking down the street. You can't start with the marshmallow man, but it's a progression of if this, then that. The math of Avengers Endgame doesn't work because if the rules that they've set up are implemented, then this should be the end result. But they changed those rules at the end for a happy ending. Now, as a fan, now, Mackenzie, I see exactly what you're saying. And I agree with you that some people are getting hung up too much on those rules. Because what the Russo brothers are trying to do is give us our happy ending. They want Cap to have his happy ending, his perfect out. They want Tony to have his happy ending, his perfect out. And to do so, they broke some rules. They broke some rules for the script writing so that they could give these characters their happy ending. But for certain fans like Dan who rely on those rules that they set up, that you need to still stay in the rules because otherwise, like, what are we trusting in? Like, we've kind of trusted in these rules through this whole story, and then to throw them out in the last 5 minutes of the film, it can leave such an unsettling effect on your psyche and on your impression of that story because they built up this amazing story with this amazing structure, and then at the end they kind of said, "Oh, and hey, there's a couple of trapdoors that we didn't tell you about that would have solved this really easily."
And I think I'm so happy.
We really want to make you happy.
We all know that Captain America and Peggy are my loves in the Marvel universe, followed very closely by Loki. That I was just happy to see him with his happy ending, and him being there didn't bother me because my brain didn't worry about why he was there versus why he wasn't somewhere else. irony of that statement.
And it'll be interesting over the next 5 years to see exactly how. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how people see this movie in 5 years. Like, will it be? Oh, that was the climax. That was the point. That was the explanation. That was like the period on the greatest story arc in history. Or will we be looking back and saying, it was good, but it kind of didn't make sense. You have to just suspend your disbelief.
Again, I'm going to repeat. It was still a good movie. Yeah, it still was a good movie. It just wasn't the epic conclusion I was hoping and expecting. But it did have a lot of good points. It had a lot of great things. For those women out there that love superheroes as well, the moment we have Captain Marvel and all the women standing around her saying, "We'll protect her." Great moment. For little girls out there that want to be a hero.
I had a little issue with that because my issue, and I'm probably going to get so much hate for this. But considering I got snapped and I didn't get to say this, I didn't like that part. It felt like it was, and this coming from a woman, girl, whatever you want to call me.
I feel like it was pandering.
It felt a bit like pandering, and that I wasn't able to suspend my disbelief that all the female characters would just randomly come together.
Yeah. No, and
I could believe it in the first one, in the Infinity War, when there's that little heroine.
I could see maybe if we had like Pepper and people who knew each other beforehand. It was just one of those things where because people didn't know each other beforehand, that to me did going back to the disbeliefs. Yes. It didn't do it for me, and like I said, this coming from a woman,
of disbelief.
I didn't like it. I mean, it was a cool moment, and we can argue that there were a lot of cool moments in this movie, but it just didn't. No. It felt like fan service or feminist.
No.
Yeah.
It was pandering. It was fan service. It was very forced.
Yeah, and I think if she had been around longer, I would have been okay.
In the movie
I would have been more okay
as much
with
as we had thought and had hoped for. And then, I think so, because she was constantly like, I'm around, I'm out in the galaxy because you guys aren't on these other planets. I'm doing my thing. Okay, I get that. But at the same time, she didn't build any relationship with any of the Avengers, any of the other characters. And then half of these people, well, more than half of these people that showed up to protect her and swarm around her, had been gone for 5 years, and suddenly they're like, "Yep, we're here. We'll protect her. We'll bang our fists against our chest, and we'll be strong." That just didn't make any sense. The only person that had any real connection solidly with her died when we got, when she sacrificed herself for the Soul Stone. It made no sense to me. Again, another point that just was jarring. It was cool. I will give it that for any little girl or any teenager out there, or even woman that wanted their cool girl power moment. You got it. That was awesome.
Like,
I'm trying not
it didn't feel natural
to be mean about it, but it just felt forced. It did felt like
natural
it was
when they went to save their friends. When everything was collapsing, like that felt natural. That all of a sudden everybody was trying to save their drowning friends because that is legit. But there you go. If anybody's going to get hate of the two of us, it's probably me. Oh, well.
Yeah. So, all right. We're running. We're running out of time. This show has gone longer.
Speaking of time.
So what we're going to say, give us your opinion. Let us know what you thought. If you hate it, that's okay. If you hate us, that's okay too. Now, because you're hating us, you're creating an alternate timeline. And there is a timeline where you love us. And, it's okay. But, give us your opinion. Give us your feedback. We hope you enjoyed the show. Because we're going to do a lot more of these kind of focused on theory things. We'll still do the fun stuff of interviews. But, we kind of think that these shows will be awesome. And if maybe your suggestions, your comments, or cool enough, we'll bring you on the show so that you can jump in on a conversation as well. Maybe there's a part 2 to this
theoretical
time travel theory, and you're going to be the expert and explain it and wow us and get us converted to your side. So awesome. Yes. So with that said, we're out of here, and we'll catch you next time.
Gotta get back in time. Yeah.